And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 818, as we continue our team by team previews for the 2026 fantasy baseball season. We are in the NL East. We're talking Washington Nationals baseball, where the team results might not always be what we want, but they seem to have some fantasy goodness throughout the roster more often than not for a mid-tier team, is the best way I'll say it. And in order to help me break this down, as a friend of mine, a friend of the show, I enjoy seeing her every year in FPAS, her work over on Fan Tracks as she writes up a storm over there. You'd never know it because I give her a hard time because she never posts about it.
Oh, I
But
know.
that's a whole other story. You can find her on X the few times she does at LK Auerbach. Lauren Auerbach, how are we doing, my friend?
Bubba, I love the intro, and it's so true. I'm just like a ghost over there on Twitter, but um, I am very happy to be here. Always love kind of hanging out with you and talking baseball. And as a fan of baseball, I listen to like a lot of podcasts, and one of the can't miss kind of pods is your team preview series. And I think that everyone's great who contributes to it. And I'm very happy to contribute 1/30th of it when talking about the Washington Nationals.
Well, I appreciate it because it started out, I had a person for every team, and they always get invited back. You've been the Nationals the entire time, which is, I think this is year 4, I want to say,
I think it's
doing
like
this.
fourth or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. But I'm down. I have about 3 or 4 teams now that have just like Britton Allen's going to do the Braves. Lucas Beery
Mhm.
does the Raiders. They're not really fans, but they know what they're doing. So it's good to still have the representation back to
Yeah.
help break them down. And it seems like every year when we talk the Nationals, you and I have a weird love for a lot of these players. Like you because you're a fan, but I enjoy them for fantasy purposes. So it's a very I enjoy the podcast more than some other teams. It's nothing about the guests. It's just some teams are just not great. So before we get into the Nats, I mentioned fan tracks. Let everybody know what you got going on over there.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we're right in the middle of kind of draft season. So they've got the draft kit out that I've been contributing content to, and, kind of pumping out, weekly write-ups and articles there. So just, if you want to check out my work, which, you should, because, I'm a horrible promoter, just, head on over to fantraxhq.com and you'll find it there.
Yeah, and I just give her a hard time because I like her, and it's like a running joke now every time we see each other. So
It's awful.
that's all it is. But before
Mhm.
we get into the players for 2026, Lauren, how do you like? Obviously, they didn't win the East, but how do you think 2025 went for the Nats?
Yeah, I mean, it was a disappointment. It was, the Nationals walked away with, they were a 66 win team. And that kind of, came ahead of only the Rockies and White Sox. And it was disappointing. They took a step back from their 2 previous seasons where they were 71 wins seasons, which isn't great. But to see that kind of dial back of games was disappointing. And I think personally, I was really bummed because last season on your show, like I was like really pumped. I thought 2025 was going to be the year that this team would kind of take the next step forward. You would have, I was excited that, both James Wood and Dylan Cruz were going to have, their first full seasons essentially under their belt, combine that with, some CJ Abrams. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to make some strides, because I feel like this team has been in kind of rebuild mode forever. And, that didn't happen, for a variety of reasons. We'll probably get into that later in the show, but it was disappointing. I will say that the Nationals, to their credit, though, they kind of stepped in, and they've kind of been, I think, made good moves in terms of trying to find a solution and move forward. In the middle of the season, they got rid of Davey Martinez. They also fired Mike Rizzo, who's kind of the longtime president of baseball operations. And, this offseason has been a busy one for the team. And they had hired Paul Taboni, who kind of came over from the Red Sox. And I'm not going to get too much into the weeds here, but it is important to note that, Taboni kind of comes from a kind of a big player development background that is analytic driven. And the Nationals have kind of given him the green light to kind of overhaul this organization. And he has, and he's made, the hires that he's made this offseason, anywhere from player personnel up into kind of the executive level. The one thing that, all these individuals have in common are kind of this, analytics based performance driven stuff for players in terms of squeezing the most out of players and using kind of modern technology to do it. So I think that in terms of an upgrade, that's an upgrade in terms of philosophy for the team. And it's something that, while I don't know what that means for 2026, it's, I think, a step in the right direction, and is something that we should keep in mind, the back of our minds, when we talk about some of these players in 2026 for fantasy.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't fully aware. That's why I like to do these shows about all that kind of stuff, because it's been like a kind of quiet off season for the Nats. They made the trade we'll talk about with Ford, but for the most part, if you just go through roster resource, it's a lot of the same parts, and you look at it and go, it needs this, this, this. Like, there's what's going to. But if you put into context what you just told us in my brain, it tells me, okay, if anything, there still might be a few smaller moves, but it's almost like he wants to feel out like what's going on here. This could be a team that might be active at the trade deadline to keep bolstering things. Like, I guess maybe where you're going with like this roster could be different by like so. I think it'll be really interesting because I didn't realize about the whole shift in development, and it's nice to have ownership that actually lets people they hire do their job.
Right.
It does not always happen, and that goes a long ways as well. All right, let's get to it though. One of the big guys we're looking forward to his first season is James Wood. His age 22 season, hit 31 homers, stole 15 bags, 94 RBIs, hit 256 on the face. That is a really good stat line for a rookie season. But we all know the second half swoons. Things got ugly around there. James Wood's ADP is 33 over the last 11 draft champions drafts. What are your thoughts on Wood this year? He'll be 23, still super young, and the skills are very good, but there are some concerns.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, his final stat line, you can't really complain about it. He's a 5-category contributor. He took really big strides in the power department and led this team in home runs with 31. But yeah, that really masks, like you said, kind of that second half nosedive. A lot of that production came in that first half. 24 of his 31 home runs happened in the first half. 12 of his 15 stolen bases happened in the first half. And I think he's got that, that swing and miss profile, right? Where it can come back and bite you. And it really did for him in the second half, where he hit 39, or he had, a 39% strikeout rate. He only made contact at a 65.3% rate overall. So that's the floor. And we saw that. And you're right. I think the conversation surrounding James Wood is, what is your risk tolerance and what are you willing to pay for him? For me, I think that would you say he's going about pick 34? That's a little bit too rich for me. But I do understand, if people are kind of looking at James Wood in terms of the glass half full, it's like, hey, well, he still had this massive year in terms of production with only essentially, crushing it in one half. What if he had, a full season of doing that, or, 3/4 of the season? I think that's what people kind of want to see. Because I think one of the things that, is kind of positive still about Wood is that he still smashes the ball when he does make contact. He had a 16.3% barrel rate last season and a 56.3% hard hit rate. So there are, there is good stuff under the hood, but he does have that kind of risky profile. I was actually looking at, the Bubba and Bloom, the NFBC ADP tracker for Wood. And I thought it was really interesting because in about the last 10 or so drafts, James Wood min and max has shown up. He was taking as early as the 21st pick, which is really high for me, I think. But as late as 56, like the fact that he fell to 56, like I will take him all day at 56. But I think that shows, kind of those question marks, how people are viewing James Wood. Do you believe in that upside so much? Or is it like, this is too risky for me at this point in the draft, which is early?
No, that's a great point, because like everything you've been saying, I think it's been my brain while I'm drafting. It's like, I think the skills are still great with James Wood. The way he hits the ball so hard and everything, with that price of like an ADP for 33, 34. I'm like, yeah, that's not my jam. I'm a very cautious drafter. I've said it for years now. But yeah, you get down to 56 now. Okay, we can at least have a discussion on where things are going, because to your point is he's 23. If he figures anything out, what's to say he can't go like 40, 30 or so? Like the dude's got
Oh, absolutely.
crazy skills. And at that point, you're talking a first round player, not a third round. Like there's just levels to it. It's just what's your risk tolerance.
Mhm.
And I'm not there's probably why I'll never win an overall competition because I just don't play for that.
Yeah,
But
too safe.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm too safe. And I've said it for years. Like one of these days, I just need to, S or get off the pot is what it comes down
Yeah.
to. And just go for it. And I did that once out of my 3 OCs last year. Like my last draft, I'm like, I'm going to make it a FOMO because I kept saying all draft season, like I want James Wood, and I drafted him in that one. I'm like, okay, we got him. First half of the year, I felt freaking awesome for that. It kind of obviously things didn't go well, but yeah, I could see it. A little tweak here. There, he's still so young. So
That's that's the thing.
it could be an analytics thing.
Yeah, and that's he's going into his 20, I think, year 3 season. And I was going to point out, because this is something to keep in mind kind of moving forward with these players, when I had kind of brought up that development kind of upgrade with this team now, is that their hitting coach, I think it's Matt Borgschult, and he came over from Minnesota, and he's, it's been reported throughout the season that this team is now like pushing, kind of two goals in terms of hitting, and it's owning the zone, which is basically, swinging less or whiffing less, chasing less, and attacking, the strike zone. But also, Borgschult has been really vocal about increasing this team's launch angle. And one of the things with James Wood that we didn't really touch upon is that he hits the ball hard, but it tends to go into the ground at a 50% rate. And that is not unusual to a lot of these players that we'll talk about. The Nationals had the lowest launch angle in terms of teams. It was a 9.9 degree angle. And so, this kind of new hitting system is like, let's make better swings and, attack the zone better, control the zone. And so I think that that's something to keep in mind. If you can kind of tweak that, not only with Wood, but some of these other players, that could unlock that next level of that, kind of 40 home run power level for Wood. And that's why I think you have people taking a shot on him early in drafts.
It's a great point. Really good point. Can't wait to revisit this one next year because I think we're both on the same page in a roundabout way. Like I want to see him do it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll see where that goes. CJ Abrams, a player you and I have both been pretty good fans of. Obviously, when we talked last year, he got kind of like put on timeout for the rest of the season after enjoying a night outside in Chicago. Like who wouldn't at that age? But yeah, it's a whole other conversation. Yeah. But came back 19 homers, 31 steals, almost mimicked 2024, hit 257. Really strong year. He's only going to be 25 this year. Another just youth on this team. Why we like him so much. But ADP is around 60 over the last 7 drafts on the NFBC. I'm an Abrams fan. Where are you at this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take him all day, every day here. And what I like, do a lot of, player analysis and stuff. I love it when I come across guys that I don't have to overthink. And CJ Abrams kind of falls into that category for me. For the last, I pencil in kind of 20 home runs, 30 steals, a 250 batting average. These are numbers that he's put up every single year for the past 3 seasons. And I think that, you can add to that there's some durability as well with Abrams. He's hit kind of the 600 plate appearance mark for 3 straight. His ground ball has also ticked down for 3 straight. So there's a lot to like. He doesn't strike out a ton. He also doesn't walk, but the contact rates are solid. Hits at the top of the order. I don't have to think too much here. And I think in terms of ADP. He's going, I think, at about the 7th shortstop off the board. He's on this kind of little ADP island by himself, and I'll just take him all day here.
Yeah, he's like one of the last like upper tier shortstops. Mm-hmm. Look at that, it just really falls off a map for a while. So I love him. It's boring, it's consistent, and that's why I draft the way I do. Yeah. So give me CJ all day. All right, can't wait to get your thoughts here on Dalen Lyle, a guy that just burst out last year, especially in the second half. 9 homers and 8 steals, hit 299 over 91 games. He also had 4 and 12, like 321 in the minor league. So monster season all around for Dalen Lyle. Right now, I thought his ADP would be higher this draft season. It really hasn't. It's just outside the top 200 right now. So where are you at on Dalen Lyle?
I'm in. I'm all in. I will say that promote one of my pieces. A couple weeks ago, I wrote a piece about kind of highlighting players with second half breakouts who could provide kind of sneaky value draft day. And Dalen Lyle was included in this write up. He was someone that the Nationals called up from AAA, I think at the end of May last season, and he just really struggled. They immediately threw him kind of back into the minor league, but he reemerged in mid-June, and he was like another hitter. And he ended up coming out of the All-Star break as one of the best hitters in the league. He racked up 70 hits across 210 at bats, and that included 10 doubles and a league leading 10 triples. Lyle also, he was hitting line drives at a 30.1% clip in the back half of the season. He also flexed some power. He hit 7 home runs with 6 coming in September. And he also added 5 steals on 7 attempts in the second half. When it was all said and done in that second half, Dalen Lyle, he crushed it. He had a 333 batting average, a 956 OPS, and a 162 WRC plus over those 230 plate appearances. I really like Lyle because, he offers a little bit of everything. He's got the power, he has the speed, he has the batting average, he makes a ton of contact. And he's one of the best in the league so far. It's a small sample size, but at, kind of really always kind of hitting the launch angle sweet spot. Bubba, you know that in the draft, the further you go, it's hard to find guys that can provide batting average. And I think that's like his main thing. But he also provides some pop and speed with that. I had looked up, his Steamer 600 just to kind of see what they were giving him. And basically they have him as kind of a 14 home run, 16 steal, 271 batting average over 600 plate appearances. And you're right. I think that 200 price point, I'm taking that all day. I think that there's some, not everyone, I don't think, was kind of paying attention at the end of the season. People fall off for a variety of reasons. And I think people are like, who's this Dalen Lyle? And you should be paying attention to him.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that because I was super aggressive early in draft season. Like, I love this guy. I loved what I saw because I don't stop doing baseball. I follow it to the end. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is great. And then I started hearing little things and his I started hearing people thinking like, maybe not. And then you watch his ADP and I'm like, what am I missing here? Like, this makes no sense. So I kind of slowed down. I've still been in on him, but I'm wondering what it was. So at least I'm not the only one seeing these things. So that's good. So I thought, how do you get a guy at 200? Your point, hits for average can be 15-15. This is a poor man's, maybe the same man, Michael Harris, going a lot later to me. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot to like there. All right. A guy you were very interested in last year, I was kind of still wondering what he would be. And I think we still are wondering what he will be. And that's Dylan Cruz. He had a lot of injuries again, or injured time again in 2025, played 85 games, 10 homers, 17 steals. So we got the speed as we expected, a little bit of pop, a hit 208, a little bummer as well for Cruz. Right now, his ADP is around 160, 165, depends on where you're drafted, which is kind of weird that I'd rather have Dylan Lyle than Dylan Cruz. But what are your thoughts on Dylan Cruz entering this year, assuming he stays healthy, of course?
Yeah, like I said, kind of at the top, I was kind of looking forward to seeing a full year of Dylan Cruz, and that didn't really happen. He was derailed with an oblique injury in May, and that kind of cost him half of the season. But he did produce a little bit. Like you said, he had, kind of 10 home runs and 17 steals in 85 games. And I think what was interesting was that when he returned, from the oblique injury, he was still active on the base paths. And, we have to remember that this is also a very active team when it comes to stealing bases. And even though we've got a new regime here in Washington, I don't expect that they will stop stealing bases altogether, because this is a very young team. This is what they do because they don't have a lot of power on this team. So one of the things that was really encouraging to see about, Dylan Cruz when he returned was that, he was 6 of 8 on the base paths. He also put up another kind of 3 home runs. And, his plate approach in that stretch when he came back was pretty solid. He only had an 18.8% strikeout rate and an 8.7% walk rate. And I think overall, I'm still interested in Dylan Cruz. I don't think we've kind of seen the most of him, I guess, in terms of fantasy. And he brings solid quality of contact to table. And yeah, I think that his batting average last season of the 208 is not good, but I really think that there's probably some positive regression, and I think he's normally about like kind of a 235, 240 hitter. Again, he lanes ground ball, and that could limit some of his power numbers. But I think that with Cruz, the kind of main kind of value for him fantasy wise is with his steals. And I really think that he's actually more of a 30 to 35 steal guy. And I think that you can kind of pencil in 15 to 18 home runs with that. But it's really, I think he can move the needle on the steals. And I think that his draft point is fine. I know you said you would maybe prefer, Dylan Lyle going later, but I think kind of where he is in the, according to like in the outfielders, I think he's about like the 40th outfielder off the board. And I think he's fine. I think especially if at that point in the draft, you're looking to kind of fill holes in your team. And I think that if you went really kind of power heavy and you needed to make up steals, I think that Dylan Cruz is someone you should be considering at that point.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Stay healthy, Dylan.
Yeah.
A guy that I've always loved, and I get my co-host always tells me I'm a dummy because he platoons and all these things, but Luis Garcia Jr. He was still so young. It seems like he's been playing forever. 16 homers, 14 steals last year in 139 games at 252. Maybe he's going to sit a bit versus lefties because he's really not good versus lefties. That's fine. There's rumors he might play first base. That seems to be on hold for the moment. You'll probably answer that question as well. But Luis Garcia, the difference this year to me compared to previous years is his ADP is about 237. You're not paying a premium for him, and that makes me like him even more. Where are you at on Luis Garcia Jr.?
I'm all in on Luis Garcia Jr. I feel like we had this conversation last year. I basically, he didn't put up, it wasn't a bad line that he put up, last year. It was just a little bit underwhelming. I referred to Luis Garcia Jr. as Altuve light last year in the sense that he's got 2020, he's like a kind of 2020 strong batting average profile, I think. And, while that kind of expectation fell short, last season, there's like no reason why he can't, kind of hit that mark moving forward. Yes, he's terrible against lefties. We know that he's going to be a strong platoon guy. But, when I was looking at some of his kind of underlying numbers, I think that there are reasons to kind of, still be in on Luis Garcia Jr. He's been making more contact. He made more contact or quality contact, I should say, in 2025. And overall, he's increased, both his barrel and hard hit rates for 3 straight seasons. His barrel rate went from 5.8% in 2023 to 9% last year. He also upped his hard hit rate from 36.5% to 45.8% last year. He was also elevating the ball more, so you have fewer ground balls. He went from about 53% ground ball rate in 2023 down to 45.1% last season. This is a guy who makes elite contact in the zone. He does chase. He does chase a lot, which, maybe they can kind of curb that this year. But, I think it's also worth noting he had a 284 XBA last year. So I like Garcia Jr. for all those reasons. Plus, you mentioned, there's a possibility that he could get moved to first base. I don't know that he's going to be kind of an everyday first baseman, but, they started giving him, they started having Luis Garcia Jr. take reps at first base at the second half of last season because he's been he was a liability defense wise last year. And so they're like, okay, well, let's kind of see if we can shift him over to first base. The new president of baseball operations, Paul Toboni, he's already said that he wants Garcia Jr. to be taking more reps in winter ball this year. And so I think they're trying to kind of push him over there. Like I said, I don't know that if it's like an everyday thing, but I think he should gain first base eligibility. And I think when you have that CIMI, that's super beneficial, especially, in 15-team leagues. And it's something that I would maybe try and pay up for, given some of these other things that I mentioned. Second base is kind of a weird position in that, like, if you don't get those 3 top guys, it's like just a big pool of perfectly decent, perfectly fine, for the most part, guys that aren't really going to hurt you. And I don't think outside of being a strong side platoon bat, so you'll be missing some at bats there. I think that he's not going to hurt you anywhere. I think you can kind of put him in, and I think that you could see some positive regression with that batting average plus first base eligibility. I really like that.
Yeah, that is a definite plus to throw on to the. I think the skills are still very, very good. So you combine the two at that price. I am quite excited for the potential there. All right, the moment everyone's been waiting for. Who I think is the most underrated catcher in fantasy baseball right now. It's Kyber Ruiz. For multiple reasons. Obviously, the last 2 years have not gone great, but we're talking about a illness that made him lose a bunch of weight. We're talking about concussions. Maybe he's still concussed. Who knows? But he's still also only 27 years old. And before these two massive, down seasons, was one of the better contact hitting catchers in baseball. And the part that I stand up for is his ADP's 393 over the last 7 days. Now, again, I could be wrong. Lay it on me. But I have way too many shares already of Kyber Ruiz.
I think, Bubba, if you can find someone who loves you as much as you love Kyber Ruiz at his 2025 draft cost, you're set for life. That's a good thing. No, I'm not as bullish as you are on Ruiz, but I totally get your arguments. It's making similar arguments about him heading into the 2025 season. It's like, let's just throw 2024 out the window, with his illness where he just didn't ramp up properly and all this stuff. Where I think I pumped the brakes a little bit from you is that coming into 2025, Ruiz, went through the proper ramp ups. He's healthy. And I think, out of the gate. And I think that you look at what he produced before he kind of a concussion essentially ended his season, in those 267 plate appearances, he slashed 247, 277, 318 with 2 home runs and 0 steals and a 65 WRC plus. Sure. That's not a full season. He could have, had that balanced out if he played longer. But I think now I'm looking at Ruiz as now 2 years removed from his best season. Had, fluky injuries, but I don't love that when this new regime in Washington, they didn't make a ton of splashy moves this offseason, but you can argue that the splashiest move they made was to pick up, Harry Ford. And so I don't love that Harry Ford is sitting there if you're thinking about Kyber Ruiz, but I think that you're right, Bubba, in the sense that he's going around pick 400 or just inside pick 400, which is really crazy. I do think that Ruiz will start the season as the opening day catcher. The concern is I don't know how long his leash is, playing time wise. And I'm not sure what that quality of play is. I don't think I see him as rosy as hitting kind of his upside last year. I could be wrong. I think it's it's certainly possible. But I think it's interesting that both Ruiz and Harry Ford, they're essentially going back to back in drafts. And I'm curious to see if that moves or if it stays that way. And I think it just kind of depends on, kind of what your belief is in Ruiz. I don't really like Ruiz as a catcher too, which I think, are you fine with him as a catcher too?
No, he's my catcher 3. He's my catcher 3.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I was going to clarify when you're done. I was clarify. He's my catcher 3.
Yeah.
Or even a platoon guy works, but maybe he figures it out again, and I'm gravy.
Yeah. But catcher 2 is 2. I don't like that. I'm fine with catcher 3. Yeah.
No, I'm way too cautious with my catchers. I have my catcher 2 way before Kyber Ruiz goes off the board. And trust me, the Ford thing worries me. I cover the AOS for Baseball HQ for PT tomorrow, and I had to watch Harry Ford's minor league all last year, waiting for him. And when they traded him, I said it makes too much sense because there's this guy called the Big Dumper in the way, so that was never going to work. And it was just because in the minors they put him in the outfield, they had him all over the diamond trying to figure out something that never worked. So I get it, I fully get it, and. To your first point, I don't know if I could ever find someone that loves me that way because that's probably just foolish love is what they call it. But we'll see. I'm very optimistic, probably to an extent of not healthy. But,
I am curious. Yeah. This is something that I think people should pay attention to in spring training, because I think that it is kind of a question mark also in terms of, like I said, I think that Ruiz starts, but it's possible that Ford does. It's just kind of really interesting. I think it's something to pay attention to in spring training.
Yeah, it could be this new regime. They brought in their new shiny toy, and they're like,
yeah.
okay, we're
And
one
of
roll.
the, I was saying that one of kind of the assistant hitting coaches, one of the new guys, actually spent the last 2 seasons in AAA with the Mariners. So it's like there's also that familiarity. They brought this guy on board. And so I just think that the writing's on the wall, for Ruiz. But yeah, I mean, he's dirt cheap in drafts. And, if you have any interest in that, yes, go pick him up.
Yep. All right, let's go to third base. Brady House was a prospect we talked about last year, getting to have a chance. Played 73 games, 4 homers, 5 steals, hit 234. It was an up and down, but to me, cup of coffee, get your feet wet, see where it goes. Maybe, and again, he'll be 23 this year. There's a trend with the Nationals, very young ball club. Brady House's ADP is around 480 over the last week. If he's a starting third baseman, that's a ridiculous price in a DC. I'm just going to say that. But where are you at on Brady House this year? Because it wasn't like overwhelming last year, but again, super young.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think for an everyday third baseman, it is kind of a ridiculous price. I think part of it is that he wasn't coming off like a great year. He was called up in mid-June, and yeah, he held the position down for the rest of the year, but he wasn't like super great. He finished with a 56 WRC plus and a 574 OPS. But it's interesting because, House is a former top prospect. He was drafted in 2021 as, to be the third baseman of the future for this team. So I think that House will be given all the time in the world to kind of try and figure things out. And with the new player development, it's something that you should at least be consider okay, well, this could work out for him, because there are some holes in his profile, from the kind of limited time that he's been, in the major leagues. He's got poor plate skills and, poor plate approach. He struck out, at a 28.5% clip last year. He walked below 3%. And, he also kind of carried below average contact rates, and he chased a lot. And what I said earlier was that this new kind of hitting coach and development style is they want to kind of, try and solve some of these things. The chase rate, number one, being able to kind of lift the ball more, because Brady House also leans ground ball. So this is something where he could benefit, especially from this new system. Like you said, he's only, he'll be 23 this year. There's a lot of room for improvement. I think they'll give him a really long leash. And I think that in deeper leagues, he should be drafted, like you said, in DCs or draft and holds or stuff like that. I think even in 15-team fab leagues, I think Brady House is a perfectly solid dart throw at the end of your draft. And because who knows, something could be unlocked. He could be terrible, but at that point, you can just chuck him to the waiver wire.
Yeah, I agree. He's free. So see what you can do with it. And there is another level to him. You would imagine, just when does he tap into it? Nasim Nunez, he's shortstop eligible, projected to play second base for the Washington Nationals. Obviously, that's if Garcia stays at first. There's moving pieces here, but I bring him up because this guy with a ton of speed, hits for an okay average, not a ton of pop, but if he plays enough, we're talking about a pick after pick 400 that could run wild for you potentially. Is the playing time looking like it's going to be there to make this a viable option?
I think they're going to try to. I think that this Nasim Nunez is the one where it's like if they shift Luis Garcia Jr. over to first base, it's because then Nunez is expected to fill in at second base, and he would be better defensively. And like what you said, I mean, he's kind of a rabbit that where, I think his defense will keep him on the field. And so if they can make it work, I think that they will try to. Nunez was, a former Rule 5 pick from the Marlins a couple of years ago. Like you said, he's got 98th percentile speed, and he's good. It's he's good in terms of kind of picking and choosing when he runs. He was 36 of 42 in AAA last season, over 63 games. He doesn't have a lot of big league miles under his belt, but in terms of kind of stealing, he's 17 for 20 overall across kind of 90 games between 2024 and 2025. And I think that like kind of looking forward, assuming he sticks, he should be able to get on base at a nice clip. He's carried double-digit walk rates throughout the minor league. And he's got plus contact rates and plus plate discipline metrics in the small sample size. So I think if anything, he could be worth picking up. Like you said, he's going around pick 400. He's great cheap speed, and he's someone, if he sticks in the lineup, he could really surprise, and he could definitely like pick up more steals than Abrams, who I think had 31 last year. But he's got that speed where he could easily, Nasim Nunez does, where he could easily get into the 40 steal range.
Yep, he's kind of a Caballero type, I think, but I like Nunez more, I believe.
Yeah.
But kind of that similar vibe to me when I look at it. Jacob Young, talk about another type, kind of rabbit type that you got running around there. Not as much speed as Nunez maybe, but can run wild, can hit for, again, an okay 250, 260 average. Nothing crazy, but I'm wondering what is going on here, because I must be missing something. ADP is like 620.
I know.
And that just seems crazy. Once again, I'm saying crazy for the listeners. It's DC's like a starting outfielder at 620 is just you don't find ever. So what am I missing here with Jacob Young?
I think Jacob Young is the rabbit, and another rabbit, I should say. And like I remember being really optimistic about him in last year because he stole 33 bases, had a 256 batting average, and I think like 150 games or something like that. The problem is, last year he really fell out of favor with management, and now we've got new management though, so I don't really know how they're viewing Jacob Young. But basically last year in the back half of the season, Davey Martinez had him sitting, and he ultimately fell into a short side platoon role with Robert Hassel. Both of them put up not really good fantasy lines, and I don't know. I'm not sure how the new organization views Jacob Young. And I think maybe that's what you're seeing in terms of is really low ADP. So I don't know, but I think that assuming that he is the everyday, center fielder, his defense will keep him on the field. He's fast, so he can kind of cover center field really well. It's just, I guess, is he the guy that this new organization, backs essentially? I think that he will be, but I don't know, and I think that maybe that's kind of why he's going in the 600s.
Yeah, that's fair. I keep taking the bait at that point because why not? But yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff. Anybody else on the active roster you'd like to discuss? Because the bench does not look great. Obviously, we'll hit on the Fords and the Hassels and the prospects a little later, but the bench doesn't look stunning.
Yeah, no, there's really. There is kind of a big drop off basically in kind of that back half of the lineup in general. And the bench isn't like, oh, but wait a minute, there's this guy on the bench. It's like they don't really have that.
Agreed. Let's head to the mound. Mackenzie Gore, who I continue to be all in on, and I have like no shares this year, and that means he's going to bust out everybody. But strikeouts got better. It's been documented. It's just like the second half swoon once again for Mackenzie Gore, and he'll eat your whip alive. At the same time, Gore's ADP is about 190 though, so again, you're not paying a premium, but ratios can get tricky. Where we at on Mackenzie Gore, age 27? I know he's even been rumored in trades.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of the big. He still is, even though it looks like he's not moving anywhere. There still has been kind of like, oh, like where can he go? But I think that he's actually going to be, the ace of this lineup. And you're right. I mean, this was like he killed it in the first half, really crumbled in the second half. But if you look at I feel like I'm just starting to sound like a homer here. I'm like, but just wait, like this is why he's amazing. But I think that if you look at the second half for Mackenzie Gore, there are a couple of things worth pointing out. And I think that the first thing is that immediately after the All-Star break, Gore was just totally off. He gave up at least 6 earned runs in 3 of those first 4 games coming out of the All-Star break. And the arrows were going in the wrong direction, right? Like his Ks were down, his walks were up. But though it was like those 3 poor performances really threw his second half numbers off. So when you look at Gore's final 7 starts, he posted a 3.74 ERA, a 1.31 WHIP. He had 37 Ks and 33.2 innings, which, if you don't know Mackenzie Gore, this is a very on-brand line for Mackenzie Gore. So I think that it is encouraging that he kind of actually ended on, with those numbers. The one thing, though, to note is that throughout the second half, he was walking batters like at a 12.5 clip. That didn't change. So he was having problems with control. And I also think it's worth noting that he ended up the year on the IL with an ankle injury. And it was reported later that Gore picked up that injury previously in the second half. I don't know when, but that could also had an effect with some of his poor numbers. So like you said, I mean, Gore, he had the best strikeout rates of his career last season. It was supported by 13.3% swinging strike rate, so that's good to see. And I just really think that you'll see kind of more of the same, which is kind of a 3.80 pitcher ERA wise, a 1.30 WHIP with plus Ks. He'll give you a couple more Ks per inning, per 9. And I think really I don't mind Gore. Like, I'm still on Gore because I think that, he's kind of sneaky in the sense that, like, for the past 2 seasons, he's totaled 181 strikeouts in 2024, 185 last season. So he's giving you like really strong strikeout totals. Yes, he is a little whippy, but he's also giving you he chews through a decent amount of innings as well. In those past 2 seasons, he's hit at least 159 innings pitched. So I think that's that's what Gore puts up. There's peaks and valleys throughout the season, but at the end of the day, he chews through innings and provides sneaky strong strikeout totals. So I really don't mind Gore, just as long as you know what you're getting.
Yeah, if you build accordingly for the whip's the only thing. Like, I love the strikeouts. I think his ERA won't even kill you. Like, his ADP, even if it's low 4s, you're fine. But I think it's going to be in the high 3s probably. It's just that whip, which is consistently. I fell under the Eduardo Rodriguez vortex for years, and it was the same thing. And Toby used to make fun of me. Yeah, enjoy his 1.35 or whatever whip over and over and over, and it was just what happened. Mm-hmm. And that's what Gore is. So I guess if you build accordingly, it checks out. It's just that's like you said, you got to know what you're getting yourself into because the skills are actually really good still. And 27 is enticing. Cade Cavalli, another guy, came back from Tommy John surgery last year, did make 10 starts, which was great to see. You don't expect miracles. It was an up and down roller coaster, but there were signs, is what I'll say, with Cavalli. ADP is 345 over the last week. Are we excited about what we saw last year? There's still some concerns.
I think there's enough that I like kind of with Cade Cavalli that I think that you should be targeting him. You didn't really see him. He had a 2-year recovery from Tommy John. And yeah, like you said, he kind of had, mixed results in, the 10 games that we saw from him last year. But, I think that there'll be positive regression. 18.3% strikeout rate doesn't seem great, but, that comes with a 12.4% swinging strike rate. So I think that there's room for positive regression on that front. I love ground ball pitchers, which is what Cade Cavalli is. He generated ground balls at a near 55% clip last year. He doesn't walk people, and he doesn't give up, a lot of quality contact, which is, great. I think looking at Cade Cavalli, his pitch mix is like really interesting. His arsenal, he primarily works with a knuckle curve and a 4-seamer, and that knuckle curve is really where it's at for Cavalli. It has an 18.8% swinging strike rate on it, a near 40% whiff, and a chase rate of 40%. And he's able to kind of pair that with a 4-seamer that has like a big velocity, and he's really effective then with versus lefties with a changeup that also gets like 40% whiffs and called strikes and whiff rate are in the 95th percentile for that changeup. So I like the arsenal here. I like that he's a ground baller. I think that ultimately he'll land kind of as a strikeout per inning guy. I would say the one thing though with a ground ball pitcher is that unless the Nationals defense improves a little bit more, you could have some outings where, the defense will kind of screw you over a little bit. But I like Cade Cavalli. I'm a fan.
All righty. I'm going to just group this last bit together here and just let you run with it wherever you choose. On roster resource, they have Brad Lord, as we like to call him, the good Lord, Josiah Gray, Foster Griffin, who's a popular name in certain chats. You saw Mitchell Parker hanging out in AAA. Let's not forget that guy. There's options in this bullpen, or in the back of this rotation, is what I'm trying to say. How do you foresee this playing out? Is there any fantasy appeal? Like Josiah Gray's back, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, no, but I think Brad Lord, just kind of quickly going through this a little bit, I think he's a streamer at best. I don't think, you really need to pay much attention to, Josiah Gray. I would also argue, do we need to pay attention to him? I think that he's got more name value, but, he's out of that 18-month mark from Tommy John, and he will return this season. But I think, when I look at Josiah Gray, he just has a career of bloated ratios, and he has like a career 467 Sierra. He puts up double-digit walk and barrel rates, which is not good in general, but it's even worse because he's a fly ball pitcher. So I'm not really interested in Josiah Gray. Foster Griffin, I am a little bit interested in. This is an arm that this new kind of front office went after. And Foster Griffin has spent like the last 3 seasons in the NPB with the Yomiuri Giants. He really doesn't have essentially a lot of time in the majors, even though he was drafted back in 2014. But he's, he kind of profiles as a soft tossing ground ball arm. And, in Japan, he struck out a batter per 9 over his 3 seasons there. As we know, that doesn't always translate kind of on a one-to-one basis stateside. But I kind of think about, Foster Griffin, where you've got ground ball guy, combined with, low walk rates. And I would pay attention to that, but also with the same caveat as Cade Cavalli is that, he may be working with a poor defense at his back.
Yep, that's the concern I have is defense, and does he have the put away to be the guy I'm looking for there? Because, like I said, a lot of people are into him, and I can't figure it out, but I'm always usually not good with these new arms as well. Could be quite different. All right, now, I said the back of the rotation is a little wonky. Let's talk about the bullpen. They went and traded Jose Ferrer in the Ford trade, which we'll talk about shortly. And Ferrer did good, did the job. But right now we're looking at Clayton Beeter. There's Cole Henry. There's a whole lot of what is going on in the back end of that pen. So how would you approach this bullpen if we're talking fantasy?
Yeah, there's like a lot of question marks. But I feel like I'm really only interested in Clayton Beeter. To me, he is the arm in the bullpen that stands out the most in terms of being able to have a significant role. He came over, I believe, from the Yankees in that Ahmed Rosario trade. And so it's a small sample size here with the Nationals, but, he pitched 21.2 innings with the Nationals. And he posted a 2.49 ERA, a 1.02 WHIP, and that came with a whopping, 38.1% strikeout rate and a 15.8% swinging strike rate. So the strikeouts are there, but the walks are also there. He also was walking batters at a 21.4% clip. I'm sorry, 21.4%. Nope, sorry, a 16.7% rate. Either way, it's bad. He was walking lots of batters. But despite the walks, Beeter still limited batters to a 116 batting average. And he looked really good. In 16 of his final 17 appearances, he didn't give up a run. And so I think that, it's just kind of the swing and miss stuff is really good. He also was really excellent at limiting quality contact. Again, small sample size, but he walked away with a 5.3% barrel rate and a 28.9% hard hit rate. So, I think that this is the guy to target. And it's kind of weird because Washington is always like, you had like Kyle Finnegan everyone was like, oh, not excited about Kyle Finnegan. But I think that, he ended up having like 32, back-to-back 30-plus save seasons. And I think that Clayton Beeter is the guy that you should be targeting. I don't have a lot of interest in the other arms. But again, like, who knows? I don't know. I think also with this new kind of analytical staff, maybe they will kind of help Beeter with location or, sequencing. But I don't know. Beater's the guy. And I think that it's, what is it, like a 340 ish?
I have the ADP right here. It's 341. Yeah.
Okay.
Over the last 7 days. Pretty good. Pretty good.
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that I'd rather kind of go after him than try and kind of put together a bunch of like spec arms who don't have the roles. I kind of think that Beeter has the role.
That's good to know because, to your biggest, well, there's really good points. I hate saying that, but biggest point to me was the Nats have proven they just stick with their guy, even though you don't think they're going to be at 340. If he can somehow get you 15 plus saves, doesn't need to be a light like that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, closers are role over skills, so it's just like I think that he right now is the guy who's leading that, currently. So heading into spring training.
Yep, I like it. All right, let's talk about those prospects. Who are some of the guys we could expect to maybe see an impact fantasy-wise from this year? There's Ford, there's Hassel. Who are we talking about this year?
I mean, I think we touched upon Ford a little bit. Like I said, this was a team that their splashiest probably acquisition this offseason. And the thing is, Harry Ford, whether he slots in at the back as a backstop or they put him in DH, I think they're going to try and find ways to put Harry Ford in this lineup. He's MLB ready. Last year in AAA, he hit he slashed 283, 408, 460 with 16 home runs, 7 stolen bases, and a 125 WRC plus. And he's a top catching prospect, and he has advanced plate approach. He's walked at least 14% at every level throughout the minor league, and so I think that if it's not like initially, I think that this team wants to see what they have in Ford, and he's ready to go. And whether that's at DH or if he's really spelling Ruiz a lot, I think that he's kind of on the hitting side, the one player to target. And I think you'll see the most of him in 2026.
What are your thoughts at an ADP around 393?
I mean, that's the thing where it's like, you don't necessarily want to be stashing a catcher. That's not ideal, but it's also like, I would consider it, when it goes like basically Ruiz or Ford, like I would take Ford over Ruiz just because I think that he has a little bit more upside. So if that answers, I guess, your question.
Yep.
So
nope, that does.
Yeah.
What are we thinking about Robert Hassel this year? Because I've talked about him on a show with Bloomfield. I got his price right now. His ADP is 608 over the last 7 drafts. That gets me every time. I know he's technically in the minor, like they projected me in the minors, but I just feel like there's so much there from the left side of the plate with him compared to other options. Maybe I'm being optimistic here. What are your thoughts on Robert Hassel potentially having an impact in 2026?
I think that goes into, like, when you look at his draft spot, I think it's the same thing with Jacob Young, where it's not clear where this organization is going to go. If, one of them is going to have a starting job or if they're going to be splitting the role. There's also been reports that, we've been talking about kind of how shallow kind of the pitching side of this team is. There has been, kind of rumors that the one area where the Nationals do kind of have a surplus is with some of these young outfielders. And I know that Hassel's name has been mentioned in terms of moving. So has Jacob Young. So I think it's just like unclear. And you just see that right now in drafts. And I don't really have the answer to that. I think that if Hassel gets most of the playing time, I think you should be looking at him. He's kind of he came over with the Juan Soto deal, and he's just one of the prospects in that package that just really hasn't found success on the field yet. But again, he's young, and you've got this new development kind of team with the organization. and he could be someone that excels from that if they end up kind of keeping him around.
Yep. Nope. Great point there. Any pitchers we should be aware of? Are they a couple years away?
I just kind of I'm mildly interested to see if Jarlin Susanna kind of bubbles up this year. I may have brought him up last season. He's just kind of like this big flame thrower, like he's 6'6". And I thought he was going to be up last year, but he was hindered with some injuries, and he still needs to work on his control. But he's someone in a lot of kind of the reports, this offseason, that he's being developed as a pitcher, as a starter, but that he could also, it wouldn't be surprising if he comes in and is this team's closer of the future, because he kind of operates with, primarily with a triple-digit fastball and then a plus slider. And he still has to get over his major control issues, and he's coming off of lat strain surgery recently. But I wouldn't be surprised if he comes up. He's not someone where I think you need to be stashing him right now. But once we get into kind of that second half of the season, I'm interested to see, where they're going to put him. If it is in the rotation, if it is as maybe a closer role or a high leverage role, but it's just kind of worth paying attention to.
Good to know. All right. Last question I have for you, Lauren. What are your expectations for 2026 for the Washington Nationals?
I am cautiously optimistic about this team, and just really kind of that's based on, some of that player development that I was talking about a little bit throughout this podcast, where this is an upgraded team with an upgraded philosophy in terms of development and kind of, squeezing the most out of these players. And I guess kind of hearing myself talk about some of these players, it's still fantasy wise, I'm still a little excited about them. I still think that there is some fantasy goodness to be had from this team. And I think hopefully then from a real life perspective, we kind of gain more than 66 wins. You tack on a couple more wins, and I'll consider that, a solid win for this, kind of first year with this new organization.
It's funny, this team's not that far away if you look at it on paper. It just needs a better pitching staff. That's pretty much because the offense isn't bad. The offense I've done all the American League so far, and we're starting the East, and yes, some teams that are stupidly loaded, but for most 500 teams, you're not that far off. Is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. It's just tough division and other factors involved, but looking forward to seeing where it goes. Before we head out of here, remind everybody what you got coming up and where they can find you.
Yeah, like I said, I've just kind of been sitting over at Fantrax, and we are kind of in the middle of draft season and getting kind of that draft kit out. So you can find, all of my work over there. Technically, I do have a Twitter account, but it is, a little dormant. So, I'm not the best at promoting my stuff, but I will lead people over to Fantrax to find some of my stuff. And I always say this, I will try to be a little bit better in terms of that promotion on the social medias. But we will see how 2026 unfolds on that front.
Yeah, you're living your life. I wouldn't worry about it. Social media isn't that special. Ryan and I talk about it all the time off air to each other. We've cut back a ton if it wasn't for just posting podcasts and stuff. So I get it when it's all said and done. But more importantly, check out Lauren's work over on Fantrax. She always does great stuff, as you can tell by the wonderful wealth of knowledge she dropped on us today. And as always, thanks for joining me. I can't wait to talk again sometime.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody, this is Bench with Bubba, episode 818, your 2026 Washington Nationals team preview. Catch you all next time.